Christmas is done and I've finished making presents for everybody else, so I'm making something for myself today. And I've got these glass mugs which I just got from our local supermarket. I think they were about £1 each, so bargain. And I'm just going to use a Sharpie pen to, well, actually before I mark them, I'm going to give them a clean with some alcohol. So I'm just going to spray that on there and just use my microfiber cloth just to wipe the surface off. And then I am going to use my marker pen to mark the halfway point, or where I want to place a stencil, because I am going to be etching these mugs. So I need to make sure that I place the stencil in the right place. So it's about there. That's where I want it to be. And when I come to do the other side, oops, I have to clean that off. When I come to do the other side, yeah, I think that's actually not in the right place at all. That looks about right, which means that that doesn't look right. I think it's probably there. So let me just take that off. And then I can line up that. Let me remove that mark, which should not be there. So just give them a wipe over with the alcohol, and again, as if you were holding it, just try and mark. About right. That's not bad. Okay, so I'm just going to set those to the side, and then I'm going to go to my computer and show you how I'm going to make my stencils, and then I'll come back here once I've cut them out. Now I'm going to a website called Font Meme, which will allow me to use a font that I don't actually have to install on my computer. It's a font generator. So I'm scrolling down to find the boxes at the bottom, and the box at the top can input your text into. I'm going to use the words tea, Earl Grey, hot, which is a quote by a character from a science fiction show. And if you look underneath, there are multiple fonts from different shows within that genre. So I'm going to choose the one that pertains to that show. And you can see at the bottom that the text has been produced. I think the Y and the E are a little too close, so I'm just going to put a space between those in the top bar, and then I'll click generate, and that moves them apart and changes them. Now I want to change the colour, so I've clicked the blue bar, and I am selecting black, which will change my text to black, and I'm just going to increase the size by dragging this little bar, so I'll set it to 107. Click to generate again, and now I'm going to right click on the text at the bottom with my mouse and select save image as, and then I can save that in my downloads under a name that I know I'm going to find. Now I can go back up to the top and produce another piece of text which I want to use into stencil, which is make it so, also another quote from this character. I'll leave the settings and then click generate, and then I will right click save image as to download. Now I'm in Cricut Design Space on the canvas, and I'm going to click the upload button from the side, upload image. I will browse to where I put my images, which was in my downloads, and I will click on one of them and then go to continue. The background's already removed, so click apply and continue and choose single layer and continue. You can put it, make sure it's got a name, and you can put it into any folders you might have. Then click upload and it will bring it in onto your screen, and it's much bigger than we need. I'm going to go ahead and upload my second piece. They come in bigger than we need, so I'm just going to click on the text and then I'm going to go up to the size up here and I'm just going to change that to 40 just to make it smaller, and then I will sort the size out in a minute. So I've just moved it into the middle of my screen. Now I'm going to change this, so I need to duplicate it because I want them to be stacked on top of each other like this. So in order to do that, I need to separate my letters out. So I've clicked on the first one and I'm going to go to contour, which is at the bottom of the layers panel. Click hide all contours and it hides everything except the largest piece, which it thinks is the H. So you can click back on the pieces that you want to make them the darker grey and then hide that large piece and then click the X at the top, and now you're left with a single word. So I need to duplicate it again to repeat this, and I will click contour, hide all contours, and I might as well do the hot because one of the letters is already sorted, and then I can move that down to the bottom. So I've sped up doing the rest of the words, and once I have them all sorted out into the separate letters, I can arrange them into two parts. I'm going to make two stencils for this. Because my cup is slightly tapered, it's easier to have smaller stencils than one large stencil. So I've nearly finished arranging my words. Now I want to make sure they're aligned. So I've selected both of them at the top and I've gone up to align and I've aligned left. Then I need to group them, so you can do that over here in the layers panel or Control G on your keyboard, or you can right click and choose group. I'll align the second section and again I need to group that. So now I have my two text boxes, but they're not stencils yet. So I'm going to bring on a square from the shapes panel on the side. And then I've already measured my glass and I want it to be roughly 6.5 centimeters wide. And at the moment it doesn't really matter about the height. So I'm going to set 7. And now I can bring my text, and I'm selecting both of the texts at the moment because I'm going to want to bring them to the front. I'm just going to change the colour as well so that they will show up against the box. So now I need to resize them, and I've kept both of them together because I want to resize them together. So I need to make sure that my biggest word, which is the grey, will fit within the borders and make sure it has a border around the word. So that's roughly right. So I'll just move that over, and now I'm going to duplicate my boxes because I want to make 2. So let me bring this on the top of one of the boxes, and I'm just going to bring the other words to the front and pop that on top of that box. So I'm just moving them around on my canvas so that you can see this a little better. So now I have my first one. I'm going to drag around both of those, the text and the box. Then I'll go down to where it says combine, and I'm going to choose subtract, and that cuts out the words from the box to create a stencil. Now there's not much of a border around this one, so I'm going to make my box slightly larger. I make sure that the padlock is unchecked and I can change the width of my box. So I'm just centering my text now. You can use the align button. I'm just eyeballing it. Again, I will drag around them, choose combine and subtract. And I have cut out my stencils. So I'll need to do the same for my words on top, and then I will go ahead and cut my stencils out of permanent vinyl, just some scraps of permanent vinyl, and I'll be ready to put them on. Okay, so I used my Cricut Joy Xtra to cut out my stencils on some smart vinyl that I had. So I'm just going to peel off the excess here. Now, I like to use a permanent vinyl for a stencil, especially on glass, rather than a stencil material. I actually find I have more success with permanent vinyl than I do with stencil materials. So now I just need to weed out my letters and leave spaces which we are going to want to pass our medium through, and I will tell you in a minute what medium I'm going to use. So let me just weed all of these and I will speed up for you. Okay, so I've weeded out my stencil and I have a piece of parchment paper, and I'm just going to be applying my stencil now to the parchment paper. So I'm just going to peel up the bottom here, and depending on the font you use, you would have to use a masking tape or a transfer tape, but my stencil, or my font rather, does not have any loose centers to the text, so I don't need to use a tape. Right, I'm going to put my parchment paper underneath, and then I'm going to let my stencil fall back down onto the top of it. And I'm going to peel it off completely. So I've just got a cloth folded up underneath to try and support my glass, and now I can hopefully get this straight on my cup. So I'm going to lay it where I think I want it to be. Got to make sure I leave enough room for the rest of my text. So I'm going to start in the middle and just smooth it out to the side. I'm going to lift up my parchment paper and peel that away, and I'm just going to let this try and fall down as gently as it can, hopefully naturally in place. And I'm concentrating on the center first and trying to make sure that I get the vinyl stuck around all of the letters. I don't care if I get bubbles up there, I just don't want any bubbles around the letters themselves. So I'm just going to use we can use a popsicle stick, that will work, or a scraper tool if you have one, and I'm just going to try and squeeze any air that might be there out. Make sure that that is bonded too, and I do have a bit of a bump there, So I'm trying to squeeze it out. Whoops, I don't want to be too harsh because I don't want to tear, and I have given it a little bit of a ding there. Right, that looks like it's stuck. This is what I'm going to apply to my glass. I have had this for ages and ages. You can use it, and when you are ready to clean off your glass, scrape off the excess, pop it back into your pot, and you're going to see how little I have used in the many years that I've had it. I do need to wear gloves, so I'm going to pop those on. Okay, gloves on. Right, let me open that up. You can see it's pretty much full. It's crazy how little you use. I'm going to use my stick here just to give this a quick stir around, because it's been sitting on my shelf for some time. And then I will scrape it off back into the pot. Now, basically you just apply your paste quite thickly over the surface. Try and keep it only on the holes. This is why you want a good border around. You don't want to go anywhere else, because anywhere it touches on your glass, it's going to etch. Okay, so I'm going to spread that on quite nicely, and I'm going to let that sit for about 5 minutes. So I'll make sure that everywhere is covered, all the holes are covered, and there's a good layer on. Now I am going to babysit this because this is a round surface. I don't want any running off down the sides. It's a pretty good paste. It shouldn't, but depending on how much you put on the top, you just want to babysit it for a bit. So 5 minutes, and I'll come back and show you what I'm going to do then. Okay, that's been 5 minutes. It hasn't moved, but I'm just going to take my stick and I'm gently going to be moving this around now. Smoothing it back on again. I'm not scraping too hard. I'm really just moving the surface about and recovering it. And now I'm going to leave that again for another 5 minutes. Okay, that's been 5 minutes. I'm going to scrape it off now. So I'm going to scrape towards the middle so that I don't get any on the outside of my stencil. I'm trying not to scrape too hard. I want to take some of this off, but I don't want to lift up the vinyl. And I'm putting it back into my pot. Last little bit here. Excuse that. Okay. I'm just going to leave it over there, and I'm just going to get a baby wipe or a cloth with some water. I like to use the baby wipes. And I'm wiping into the middle of the decal. I might have a little bit there actually. I don't know what that is. Oh no, it's okay. Got it off. Right. So now I need to peel my decal off. And then I will need a clean baby wipe. going to get another baby wipe, clean that area off, and try and pull the rest of the vinyl off. It's a great way to use up scraps because you don't need an awful lot of vinyl for this. In fact, the smaller the better, so that you get good coverage and you can mold to your shape of your item that you are going to do. Come on, last bit. Okay, clean that off straight away. And it doesn't look much now, it's very hard to show you. Don't know if you can see it. If you see it, my glove inside maybe, but you will see it better later on. The longer you leave it, the better of an etch you get. So now what I need to do is let this dry off a minute, and I can add the second part of my decal, repeat the process, and I will do the same on the back. In order to make sure I line my stencil up properly, I've put my stencil down and I'm covering it with some parchment paper, leaving a little sticky area at the top. Now I can place my glass and I can see through the back, and I can line up where the text finishes and get the spacing right and make sure that it's aligned. That sticks now where the parchment paper is not covering it. So I can now just remove the parchment paper and lay my stencil down as normal. Then I did exactly the same, covering it with the paste, leaving it for a while and cleaning it off, scraping back into my pot and wiping off with a baby wipe. When I cut the piece for the back, I cut it really close to the edge because it was such a big decal, or stencil rather. So I just put some painter's tape around it just to make sure that I didn't get anywhere near the edges of the stencil, and then went ahead and made it in exactly the same way. Once I'd finished doing the etching, I used some alcohol on a microfiber cloth just to clean off the marks that I left with the Sharpie. And you do need to make sure that this is washed completely with hot soapy water. Put it in the dishwasher as long as your cup is dishwasher safe. But you need to make sure that it is thoroughly clean before you use it. And I think you can see that you get a really good etch. Just a note that there are certain types of glass that doesn't really etch very well. I think it's called borosilicate glass. You might want to test a little bit before you go ahead and try and etch. I had a slightly curvier mug, so I managed to do the same thing on that mug. So I will be able to have my Earl Grey tea in these mugs. And I just want to show you how much is left. I managed to scrape most of what I used back into the pot, and that will be usable again. Now there are safety warnings on the back of this. Basically an acidic product, so it does say you must wear gloves and protective clothing and dilute with water and wash it off if you get anything on you. So I hope you liked this video. If you did, please give me a thumbs up and a comment. Subscribe if you haven't, and come see what I'm going to do on Friday. Thanks for watching. Bye.